In the heart of Detroit's forgotten industrial district, fate was about to orchestrate an extraordinary encounter. Marcus Reed had nothing but his toolbox and the skills passed down from his father, a master mechanic who taught him that every broken thing deserves a second chance. When he discovered the abandoned 1967 Mustang Fastback, its once gleaming paint dulled by neglect, he saw more than just a car. He saw redemption. What Marcus couldn't know was that Sarah Chancellor, the brilliant CEO behind Chancellor Industries, had deliberately left her cherished vehicle there. After 2 decades of wealth-seeking suitors and hollow relationships, she'd devised an unconventional plan to find authentic love. Hidden cameras would reveal the true character of whoever found her car, but sometimes the heart sees what security cameras can't capture, and true connections form in ways even billionaires can't plan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early morning sun cast long shadows through the broken windows of the abandoned Packard plant, where Marcus Reed had made his temporary home. His weathered hands moved methodically through the contents of his father's toolbox, each tool a memory, each memory a lesson. The leather of the box had cracked with age, but the brass latches still gleamed from regular polishing, a ritual that connected him to happier days. At 45, Marcus's face carried the kind of wisdom that comes from life's harder lessons, but his eyes retained a gentle warmth that put others at ease. The toolbox beside him was more than just a collection of instruments. It was his inheritance, his identity, his lifeline to a past when things made more sense. "Morning, Mr. Reed," called Jenny, one of the shelter volunteers who made her rounds near the plant. She carried a paper cup of coffee and a brown paper bag. "Thought you might need breakfast." Marcus emerged from his makeshift workspace, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "Jenny, you're too kind. And please, it's just Marcus." She smiled, setting down the offerings on a clean piece of cardboard. "Any luck with the job search?" 3 interviews this week." He accepted the coffee gratefully. "But you know how it goes when they ask for an address." Jenny's expression softened with understanding. She'd been watching Marcus for months now, how he helped other homeless folks fix their bikes, repair broken heaters, anything to make life a little easier for those around him. It seemed cruel that someone with so much skill and such a big heart could fall through society's cracks. "You know," she hesitated, "the shelter's still got that maintenance position open. The pay's not much, but I appreciate it, Jenny." "I do." Marcus sipped his coffee, his gaze drifting to the toolbox. "But I made a promise to my old man. Reed men build things, fix things. We don't take charity." The memory of his father's voice echoed in his mind. "Son, these tools aren't just metal and wood. They're stories waiting to be told. Every engine has a voice, every broken part a chance at redemption. Your job isn't just to fix things, it's to listen, to understand, to give second chances." As Jenny left, Marcus returned to organizing his tools. Each one had a story. The socket wrench set his father had given him on his 16th birthday, the precision screwdrivers from his first job at the dealership, the diagnostic tools he'd saved 3 months to buy. Before the accident, before the medical bills that drained his savings, before the loss of his apartment, these tools had been his livelihood. Now they were his connection to who he used to be. He was about to start his morning routine, checking the local junkyards for parts he could repair and resell, when he heard it. A distinctive rumble cutting out every few seconds, then silence. To most people, it would have been just another car sound in a city full of them. But to Marcus, it was like hearing someone cry for help. Following the sound led him 3 blocks, east, past the old factory buildings, and into a small side street that time seemed to have forgotten. And there it was, abandoned in the weak morning light. A 1967 Mustang Fastback, Highland green, its beauty barely visible beneath years of neglect. Marcus circled the vehicle slowly, his trained eye cataloguing every dent, every patch of rust, every sign of wear. The car was in rough shape, but it wasn't beyond saving. Nothing ever was, his father used to say, if you had the patience and the heart to fix it. Through the driver's side window, he could see the interior was worn, but original, a rare find. No signs of forced entry, no stripped parts, just a car that someone had given up on. His fingers traced the outline of the hood, feeling the story. Written in its metal, years of sunlight, rain, neglect, and underneath it all, the solid bones of a classic waiting to run again. The irony wasn't lost on him. A homeless man discovering an abandoned car. They were both outcasts, both overlooked by a world too busy moving forward to remember what it was leaving behind. But Marcus knew better. He knew that sometimes the things society discards still have value, still have purpose, still have life left to give. What he couldn't know, as he stood there planning the resurrection of this forgotten classic, was that this moment would change everything. That somewhere, someone was watching, and that his dedication to fixing broken things would soon fix more than just a car. Sarah Chancellor stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse office, absently turning her corporate ID badge between her fingers. 40 stories below, Detroit sprawled out like a giant circuit board, its streets and buildings forming intricate patterns that all led back to the gleaming tower of Chancellor Industries. Ms. Chancellor, her assistant David Chen cleared his throat. The board is waiting in the conference room. Sarah didn't turn. On the security feed displayed on her tablet, a man was examining her Mustang. She'd watched dozens of people pass by the car over the past 3 days. Some had taken photos, others had tried the doors, a few had even popped the hood. But this one was different. He moved around the vehicle with reverence, his touches deliberate, diagnostic. Ms. Chancellor, tell them I'll be 5 minutes late. She zoomed in on the feed. And David, what do you make of this? David approached, adjusting his glasses as he studied the screen. Another scavenger looking for parts to steal. No, Sarah shook her head. Look at how he's examining it. He's not looking for what he can take. He's assessing what he can fix. The comment hung in the air between them. David had been with her long enough to recognize when she was seeing something others missed. It was that insight that had turned her father's failing auto parts company into a technology empire. The board won't be happy about waiting, he ventured. They're already skeptical about the heritage restoration project. Sarah finally turned from the window, her expression resolute. They're skeptical about everything that doesn't immediately boost quarterly profits. That's why they're the board, and I'm the CEO. She set down her tablet and straightened her blazer, a power move that had become almost unconscious over years of boardroom battles. At 38, Sarah had fought hard to be taken seriously in an industry dominated by men twice her age. Her father's name had opened doors, but her own brilliance had kept them open. The Heritage Project stays, she said, gathering her materials. And so does the Mustang experiment, David sighed. Sarah, the use of her first name marked this as personal concern rather than professional advice. I understand wanting to find someone genuine, but this, leaving your father's car out there, like bait, installing surveillance equipment, it's unorthodox. She smiled, like rebuilding a failing parts manufacturer into a tech company, or investing in autonomous vehicle research when everyone said it was science fiction. It's different, and you know it. David followed her to the door. Your father's Mustang meant everything to him. He restored that car himself. When he left it to you, he left it to me because he knew I'd understand its value. Sarah paused at the door. Not its price, David. Its value. There's a difference. The memory surfaced unbidden. Her father in his workshop, teaching her. The difference between expensive and precious. Anyone can buy a new car, he'd said, hands black with grease as he worked on the Mustang. But it takes something special to see the worth in something others have given up on. In the conference room, the board members were checking their watches and straightening their ties. Sarah took her seat at the head of the table, her mind still half on the security feed. "Gentlemen," she began, "before we discuss the quarterly projections, I want to talk about legacy." The oldest board member, Harrison, barely contained his eye roll. "Ms. Chancellor, with all due respect." "With all due respect, Mr. Harrison, my father built this company by understanding that innovation isn't just about creating the new. Sometimes it's about preserving what matters." She opened her presentation, but her thoughts kept drifting to the man with the toolbox, whose gentle touches on her father's car spoke of understanding value in a way her wealthy suitors never had. What she couldn't admit to David or to herself was that the Mustang experiment wasn't just about finding someone genuine. It was about finding someone who could see past the gleaming surface of things, past stock prices and profit margins, and corporate acquisitions, to the heart of what made something worth saving. As she moved through her slides, defending budgets and explaining vision, Sarah wondered if perhaps she was the one who needed restoration most of all. The repair manual was practically falling apart, its pages yellow with age and spotted with decades-old oil stains. Marcus had found it at the bottom of his father's toolbox, forgotten until now. As he spread it carefully on his makeshift workbench, a wooden pallet propped on milk crates, the familiar diagrams brought a smile to his face. The 1967 Mustang's engine layout was like an old friend he hadn't seen in years. "First things first," he muttered, running his finger down the troubleshooting checklist. "Let's hear your story." He'd spent the morning scrounging for basic supplies. A battery from Jimmy at the salvage yard, some starter fluid from Mike's Auto Parts, where the owner still remembered him from his mechanic days. Both had offered credit, but Marcus had politely declined. He'd bartered instead, promised to fix Jimmy's daughter's bicycle and help Mike with his inventory system. The sun was high now, beating down on the old industrial street. Marcus had created a workspace under a torn awning, providing just enough shade to work comfortably. He connected the battery, said a quick prayer, and turned the key. The engine coughed, wheezed, then fell silent. "Okay. Playing hard to get." He patted the hood. "That's all right, we've got time." What Marcus couldn't see was Sarah Chancellor, watching the feed from her private office, leaning forward slightly as if she could hear the engine's protests through the silent video. He began his diagnosis methodically, just as his father had taught him. Check the fuel lines first. Clogged as expected, the carburetor would need rebuilding. Spark plugs were shot, and the timing belt was so dry-rotted it practically crumbled in his hands. "They really did a number on you, didn't they?" He spoke to the car as he worked. Another habit inherited from his father. But that's okay. Everyone deserves a second chance. A small crowd of local kids had gathered at a safe distance, watching with curiosity. Marcus was used to an audience. The homeless community often watched him work, especially when he fixed their bicycles or portable heaters. He'd learned that every repair was an opportunity to teach. "Hey," he called out to the kids, "any of you want to learn something?" They approached cautiously, led by a boy about 12 who Marcus had seen around the shelter. "I'm Marcus. Here's a piece of history." He gestured to the Mustang. "Want to see how it works?" The boy nodded. "I'm Darius. My grandpa used to have a car like this." "Smart man, your grandpa." Marcus picked up a spark plug. "Know what this is?" For the next hour, as he cleaned and assessed parts, Marcus gave an impromptu lesson on internal combustion engines. The kids were surprisingly attentive, especially Darius, who asked detailed questions about everything from compression ratios to fuel injection. In her office, Sarah found herself equally captivated. She'd expected to see various reactions to the abandoned Mustang, theft attempts, vandalism, maybe someone trying to make a quick profit. But this gentle patience, this sharing of knowledge, it was unexpected. "David," she called to her assistant, "get me everything you can find on the homeless community in the industrial district, particularly anyone known for mechanical work." Back at the car, Marcus had reached a crucial moment. With clean fuel lines, new spark plugs scrounged from his personal supply, and a temporarily patched timing belt, it was time to try starting it again. "Okay, everyone stand back," he instructed his small audience. "Darius, want to do the honors?" The boy's eyes widened. "Really? Really? Just turn the key when I say so." Marcus positioned himself at the engine bay, starter fluid at the ready. He'd done this dance hundreds of times before, but each car was different, each revival its own kind of miracle. "Now!" Darius turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice. Marcus adjusted the choke, sprayed a precise burst of starter fluid. The engine roared to life. The sound was rough, uneven, but it was alive. The kids cheered. Marcus smiled, but kept his focus on the engine, listening to its irregular rhythm like a doctor with a stethoscope. "Still got a lot of work ahead of us," he said, making mental notes of each problematic sound. "But that's a start." As the sun began to set, Marcus carefully disconnected the battery and stored his tools. The kids had long since gone home, but Darius lingered. "Can I come back tomorrow?" the boy asked. "To help?" Marcus looked at him thoughtfully. "You really want to learn?" "Yes, sir." "Then be here at 9. Bring your lunch and your patience. Restoration's not a sprint, it's a marathon." As Darius ran off, Marcus took one last look at the Mustang. In the fading light, he could almost see what it would become, not just restored, but reborn. What he couldn't see was Sarah Chancellor, still watching, still wondering, and increasingly certain that her unconventional experiment was about to become something far more complicated than she'd planned. The bank of monitors in Sarah's private office cast a blue glow across her desk as she reviewed the day's footage. She'd had the security feed integrated into her personal system, allowing her to watch the Mustang's restoration during rare moments of downtime. Today, she found herself clicking through the recordings more often than usual. "You're going to give yourself away," David said from the doorway, carrying her evening coffee. "The board noticed you checking your tablet during the investor meeting." Sarah minimized the feed, but not before catching a glimpse of Marcus teaching another impromptu lesson to his growing group of students. "The investors were discussing autonomous vehicle aesthetics, David. I think we both know how that conversation always goes." Still, David set down the coffee and peered at the remaining visible monitor. "It's been 2 weeks. This isn't just an experiment anymore, is it?" The question hung in the air as Sarah rewound the footage to earlier that morning. Marcus was showing Darius how to clean corrosion from battery terminals, his movements patient and deliberate. The boy's attention never wavered. "Look at how he teaches," Sarah said softly. "He's not just fixing the car. He's building something more." David leaned against her desk, his usual professional distance softening. "Sarah, I've known you since college. I've watched you build this company into something extraordinary. But this," he gestured at the monitors, "this is different. You're not just observing anymore. You're invested. Is that such a bad thing?" "It's complicated." David pulled up a chair. "The man has no idea he's being watched. And from what our research shows, Marcus Reed was a respected mechanic before the accident. Multiple certifications, excellent reputation. He's not some social experiment. He's a person who's had some bad luck." Sarah's fingers traced the edge of her tablet. "That's exactly why this matters, David. Do you know what my father used to say about mechanics? That you can tell everything about a person by how they treat a broken engine?" "Close." She smiled. "He said you can tell everything about a person by how they treat things that can't immediately repay them." On the screen, Marcus was carefully wrapping his tools in an old blanket, protecting them from the approaching rain. He'd spent the afternoon fabricating a makeshift cover for the Mustang using salvaged tarps and rope. The cameras were supposed to catch someone trying to steal it, David reminded her, or strip it for parts. Instead, you found someone who sees value where others see wreckage. Sarah stood, walking to her office window. Below, the city was transforming as dusk approached, lights flickering on one by one. "Just like Dad did when he bought that car in the first place," David joined her at the window. And what happens when he finishes restoring it? When he discovers who really owns it? Have you thought about how this ends? Sarah hadn't, not really. She'd been too captivated by watching Marcus work, by his interactions with the kids, by the way he treated every broken part as something worthy of care rather than replacement. Maybe that's not the right question, she said finally. Maybe. We should be asking what's beginning, not what's ending. Sarah, I know. She held up a hand. It's complicated, it's unorthodox, it's probably crossing several ethical boundaries, but David... She turned back to the monitors, where Marcus was saying goodbye to Darius, probably reminding him to be on time tomorrow. When was the last time you saw someone teach hope? David followed her gaze. On screen, Marcus was securing the last corner of the top, checking it twice to ensure it would hold through the night. Even through the grainy footage, his care was evident. Just be careful, David said finally, both with his dignity and your heart. After David left, Sarah remained at her desk, the monitors providing a window into a world so different from her own. She opened her father's old journal, filled with detailed notes about the Mustang's original restoration. His handwriting, bold and confident, filled the margins with observations not just about the car, but about life. The true value of anything, she read aloud, isn't in its price tag or its pedigree. It's in the care someone's willing to invest in it when there's no guarantee of return. She looked back at the monitors, where the Mustang sat protected under its makeshift cover, waiting for tomorrow's lessons and revelations. I understand now, Dad, she whispered. I finally understand. The carburetor sat on Marcus's workbench, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. He'd spent 3 days carefully disassembling it, cleaning each component and cataloguing what needed to be replaced. Now, surrounded by parts laid out in precise order, he was ready to bring it back to life. That's the heart of it, isn't it? Old Joe asked, settling onto an overturned bucket nearby. The retired mechanic had started dropping by regularly, drawn by the familiar sounds of restoration work. More like the lungs, Marcus replied, holding up the main body of the carburetor. See how the ventures create a vacuum? That's what helps the engine breathe. Darius, who hadn't missed a day of work yet, leaned in closer. Like when you showed me about air-fuel mixture. Exactly. Marcus smiled, proud of how quickly the boy was learning. And this one's going to breathe better than it has in years. The small workshop they'd created had become something of a community gathering spot. Jenny from the shelter would bring coffee and sandwiches. Mike from the auto parts store had started finding old inventory in his back room. Gaskets and seals that were technically obsolete but perfect for the Mustang. Even Officer Rodriguez stopped by regularly, officially to check that everything was legal, unofficially to admire the progress. You know, old Joe said, watching Marcus reassemble the carburetor with surgical precision. I worked on these back in '67. Factory fresh, they were something else. But this, he gestured to Marcus's restoration work. This is craftsmanship. You don't see any more. Marcus paused, checking the float level carefully. My father always said restoration isn't about making something new. It's about honoring what was already there. Smart man, your father. The morning passed in focused. Work, Marcus, explaining each step to Darius, while old Joe offered occasional tips from his decades of experience. By early afternoon, the carburetor was ready for installation. This is it, Marcus announced, gathering his small audience around the engine bay. Moment of truth. The carburetor gleamed in the sunlight, every surface cleaned and polished, every component restored to its original specifications. Marcus had even managed to save the original manufacturer's stamp, carefully preserving that small piece of history. Want to do the honors? He asked Darius, holding out the wrench. The boy's eyes widened. Really? But what if I mess it up? Then we'll fix it together. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. That's what mechanics do. Under Marcus's guidance, Darius helped install the carburetor. His hands, smaller and steadier than most adults, were perfect for reaching into tight spaces. When the final bolt was torqued to specification, a small cheer went up from the gathered crowd. "Now," Marcus said, "let's see if she'll sing for us." He connected the battery, a new one donated by Jimmy from the salvage yard, who'd been following the restoration's progress. The moment of truth had drawn quite a crowd: shelter residents, local kids, even a few business owners from the neighborhood. Marcus took a deep breath, then turned the key. The engine caught immediately, settling into a smooth idle that was worlds away from its earlier rough running. The sound was deep, powerful, but most importantly, it was healthy. This wasn't just an engine running, it was an engine restored. "Listen to that," old Joe said, closing his eyes. "Like a symphony." Darius was beaming. "We did it." "We sure did, kid." Marcus ruffled his hair. "But this is just the beginning. Now we've got to make the rest of the car match the engine." The crowd lingered, admiring the sound and sharing in the triumph. Jenny appeared with a box of donuts. Can't have a celebration without something sweet. And for a moment, the abandoned industrial street felt like something else entirely. It felt like home. Later, after most people had gone, Marcus sat alone with the idling engine, making minor adjustments to the carburetor. Each small turn of a screw brought subtle changes to the engine's rhythm, like tuning a musical instrument. "See, Dad," he whispered, "still remember everything you taught me." What he couldn't know was that Sarah Chancellor was also listening, having added audio capability to her surveillance system the week before. In her office, she sat with her eyes closed, letting the engine's steady purr fill her speakers. "Remarkable," David said from the doorway, unable to hide his own admiration. "Both the engine and the man who restored it." Sarah opened her eyes, her expression thoughtful. "It's not just the restoration, David. It's what he's building around it. Community, hope, purpose." "And what are you building, Sarah?" She didn't answer, but her hand moved unconsciously to her father's old journal, where she'd been making notes of her own, learning lessons about value and worth that no business school had ever taught her. The stack of job applications sat heavy in Marcus's worn backpack as he made his way through the mourning crowd. Each form represented another attempt to bridge the gap between his skills and his circumstances, between who he was and how the world saw him. "Just need an address," he muttered, rehearsing his interview pitch. "Just need one chance." The auto shop ahead was already busy, mechanics moving with practiced efficiency between lifts. Marcus straightened his borrowed tie, courtesy of old Joe, and checked his reflection in a parked car's window. The man looking back at him was clean-shaven, presentable, professional, everything except housed. "Can I help you?" The shop manager, a heavy-set man named Frank according to his nameplate, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Yes, sir. I saw your posting for an experienced mechanic. I have over 20 years of experience, ASE certification. Fill out the application." Frank pushed a form across the counter. "Need proof of residence and current employment history." Marcus's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. "Sir, about that. I'm currently between—" "Next!" Frank called out, already turning away. Outside, Marcus removed the tie, carefully folding it back into his backpack. 3 interviews this week, all ending the same way. He'd even offered to work for free for a week to prove himself, but no one wanted to take a chance on a homeless mechanic. Back at the Mustang, Darius was waiting with his usual enthusiasm. "How'd it go?" "Not today, kid." Marcus managed to smile. "But tomorrow's another chance. Now let's see what we can do about that suspension." As they worked, Marcus couldn't help but notice how the boy's clothes were getting too small, how his shoes were wearing thin. Darius never complained, but Marcus recognized the signs. A family struggling to make ends meet. "You know," Marcus said casually, demonstrating how to check the shock absorbers, "I could teach you enough to get an entry-level position when you're old enough. Good mechanics are always in demand." "Really?" Darius's eyes lit up. "Even without college?" "Even without college, though you should still study hard. Knowledge never hurts." In her office, Sarah watched the exchange on her monitors, a mix of emotions playing across her face. She'd spent the morning researching Marcus's background, his previous employment, the accident that wasn't his fault, the medical bills that had spiraled out of control. "It's not right," she said to David, who was reviewing acquisition reports. "Someone with his skills, his character." "The world isn't always fair," David replied, but his tone was gentle. "Though some might say the same about secretly monitoring him." Sarah's fingers drummed against her desk. "What if we created a position, a master mechanic for the Heritage Project?" "Sarah, think about it, David. We're planning to restore classic cars for the museum anyway. Who better than someone who clearly understands the soul of these machines?" David set down his reports. "And how would you explain knowing about his skills, his character, his current situation?" The question stopped her short. Every solution she imagined led back to the same problem: the cameras, the deception, the breach of trust. Meanwhile, Marcus was teaching Darius about leverage and mechanical advantage, using the car's jack system as an example. "See, sometimes the hardest part isn't lifting the weight, it's finding the right place to put your effort." "Like asking for help?" Darius asked innocently. Marcus paused, caught off guard by the boy's insight. "Yeah, kid, exactly like that." The afternoon brought more job seekers to the industrial district. Marcus watched them pass, applications in hand, hope slowly fading from their faces. One man, probably in his 50s, sat down heavily on a nearby curb, his rejection still fresh. Without a word, Marcus pulled a water bottle from his cooler and walked over. "Rough day." The man looked up, surprised by the kindness in a stranger's voice. 20 years experience in manufacturing. Plant closed last month. Now," he gestured helplessly at his application. "Yeah." Marcus sat down beside him. "I know how that goes, but tomorrow's another chance, right?" They talked for a while, sharing stories of jobs lost and opportunities missed. Before leaving, the man helped Marcus adjust the Mustang's suspension, his manufacturing experience proving useful in understanding the mechanical principles. "Thanks," the man said, "not just for the water. Sometimes you forget you're not alone." In this, Sarah, still watching, felt something shift inside her. The cameras had been meant to find someone worthy of her father's car, but they'd revealed something far more valuable: a man who gave hope to others, even when he had little reason for hope himself. "David," she called out suddenly. "Cancel my afternoon meetings. I need to make some calls." "About?" She stared at the monitor, where Marcus was now showing both Darius and the unemployed manufacturer how different suspension systems worked. "About creating opportunities for second chances." The newspaper clipping fluttered on the community board at Mike's Auto Parts, its headline catching the morning light: "Mystery Mechanic Breathes Life into Classic Car." The photo, taken by a local blogger, showed the Mustang under its makeshift shelter, Marcus's figure barely visible as he worked under the hood. "You're getting famous," Mike said, handing Marcus a box of gaskets he'd been saving. "Had 3 people come in yesterday asking about the homeless mechanic and his restoration project." Marcus took the box with a mix of gratitude and discomfort. "Not looking for attention, Mike. Just trying to do right by a good car. Sometimes attention finds you anyway." Mike pointed to a group gathering near the Mustang. "Like those folks over there." Through the shop window, Marcus could see several people with cameras, one holding what looked like a professional video setup. Among them was Jenny from the shelter, apparently giving directions. "Great," Marcus sighed. "More complications." But when he stepped outside, the scene wasn't what he expected. A woman in her 60s approached him, tears in her eyes. "Is it true?" she asked. "Are you really restoring a '67 Fastback?" "Yes, ma'am. My husband." She paused, composing herself. "He had one just like it. Sold it when he got sick. Always. Said his biggest regret was not finishing the restoration." She held out a small box. These were his spare parts. He'd want them to be useful again. Inside the box, Marcus found perfectly preserved original components, small treasures that would have cost a fortune to source new. "Ma'am, I can't accept." Please, she insisted, let them help bring another one back to life. Word spread quickly after that. People began arriving with parts, stories, and offers of help. An elderly mechanic brought a collection of original Ford manuals. A classic car enthusiast offered specialized tools. Even local businesses got involved. The diner started sending over lunch for Marcus's growing crew of helpers, and the hardware store donated supplies for a proper shelter over the work area. Sarah watched it all unfold on her monitors, fascinated by how the project was transforming from one man's work into a community endeavor. "Look at this," she told David, showing him a local news website. "They're calling it the People's Restoration. It's gaining traction on social media too," David added, scrolling through his phone. "People are sharing stories about their own classic cars, their memories. The hashtag Detroit Mustang Project is trending locally." Sarah felt a familiar mix of pride and guilt. Her experiment had evolved into something she never expected, touching lives in ways she couldn't have planned. Back at the work site, Darius was giving an impromptu tour to some visitors, proudly explaining the restoration process. "And this," he said, pointing to the carburetor, "is what helps the engine breathe. Mr. Marcus taught me all about it." Marcus listened with quiet pride as his young apprentice handled the growing attention with natural ease. The boy had become the project's unofficial spokesperson, his enthusiasm infectious. A local reporter approached Marcus, notebook in hand. "Sir, people are wondering, why this car? Why here?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Sometimes things just find you," he said finally, "and when they do, you have a choice. You can walk past, or you can stop and make a difference." The reporter scribbled quickly. "And what happens when it's finished? The car must be worth a considerable amount now." "Not about worth," Marcus shook his head. "It's about value. There's a difference." In her office, Sarah froze at those words. Her father's words, now echoed by Marcus. David noticed her reaction. "Sarah? He understands," she whispered. "He really understands." The day brought more visitors, more donations, more stories. A veterans group offered to help with the bodywork. A local youth center inquired about starting a mechanics program. The Mustang was becoming more than a car. It was becoming a symbol of hope, of renewal, of community. As evening approached, Marcus sat with Darius, reviewing the day's work and the growing pile of donated parts. "Quite a change from when we started, huh, kid?" "Yeah," Darius grinned. "Think we'll be on TV next?" Marcus laughed, but his expression grew thoughtful. "You know what all this attention means, right? When we finish, the owner's bound to show up. Maybe they'll let you keep it," Darius suggested hopefully. "You're the one fixing it, not how." "It works, kid, but that's okay." Marcus picked up a donated spark plug, turning it in his hands. "Sometimes the real value isn't in what you're building. It's in what you learn while building it." Sarah, watching and listening, felt tears spring to her eyes. She reached for her father's journal, opening to a dog-eared page where he'd written almost the exact same words. "David," she called out softly, "I think it's time we started phase 2. The eviction notice fluttered in the morning breeze, its official letterhead stark against the shelter's weathered door. Jenny stood before it, hands trembling as she read the details again. 30 days to vacate. The building slated for demolition as part of a major redevelopment project. Chancellor Industries, she read aloud, the name tasting bitter in her mouth. Urban Renewal Initiative. Marcus approached, wiping his hands on a shop rag. He'd been about to start work on the Mustang's interior when he'd seen Jenny's distressed expression. "What's wrong?" She handed him the notice wordlessly. As he read, his expression hardened. The development project wouldn't just take the shelter. It would claim the entire block, including the stretch of street where the Mustang sat. 30 days, he muttered. "How many people stay here, Jenny?" 43 right now, including 6 children. She leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted. We knew this area was marked for development, but we thought we had more time. Time to find alternatives, to relocate people properly. Inside her office, Sarah watched the scene unfold with growing horror. She'd been so focused on her Mustang project that she'd missed the latest development plans crossing her desk. Now, watching Marcus and Jenny discuss the fate of 43 lives, the weight of her company's impact hit her full force. "David," she called out sharply, "get me the urban renewal paperwork, all of it." "Already ahead of you," David replied, entering with a thick folder. The shelter property was part of a package acquisition. The board approved it last month while you were distracted. Sarah flipped through the documents, her father's lessons about value echoing in her mind. The project looked perfect on paper. Luxury apartments, high-end retail, a complete transformation of the industrial district. Progress by every corporate metric. But the monitors told a different story. Outside, the news was spreading through. The community. Residents gathered in small groups, their faces showing various stages of fear and resignation. Many had been through this before. Progress always seemed to come at their expense. Marcus found Darius sitting by the Mustang, unusually quiet. "Hey, kid, you okay?" "My mom?" Darius hesitated. "She volunteers at the shelter kitchen. Says it helped us when Dad left. Now," he kicked at a loose stone. "Where do people go, Mr. Marcus?" The question hung heavy in the air. Marcus looked at the Mustang, its restoration now more complete. The knot, what once seemed like a symbol of hope, now felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. "Maybe we should sell the parts," Darius suggested suddenly. "The ones people donated could help some folks find new places." Marcus felt his chest tighten with pride and pain. "That's thinking of others, kid. Your mom raised you right." He looked at the car, remembering every person who'd contributed to its renewal. "But let's hold that thought. Still got some fight left in me." He spent the afternoon making calls, calling in favors from his previous life. Old colleagues, former clients, anyone who might have leads on alternative locations or legal assistance. By evening, a small group of community activists had set up a table near the Mustang, gathering signatures and planning protests. "It's not just about the shelter," Jenny explained to a reporter who'd caught wind of the story. "This place, it's a community. These people support each other, help each other. You can't just erase that and call it progress." In her office, Sarah paced, the development plans spread across her desk. "There has to be a way," she muttered. "Something we missed." "Sarah," David said gently, "you can't save everyone." "No." She stopped pacing, her expression set. "But I can make sure." "Progress doesn't mean destruction." She picked up her father's journal, opening to a marked page. "Dad wrote about this, you know, about how Chancellor Industries started, not by tearing things down, but by building people up." She turned to the monitors, where Marcus was now, helping organize a community meeting, his restoration work temporarily set aside for something more urgent. The Mustang stood in the background, a silent witness to the crisis unfolding around it. "David, get me the Heritage Project files, all of them, and call legal. I want options on my desk by morning." "What are you planning?" Sarah watched as Darius rejoined Marcus, the two of them covering the Mustang for the night. Even in crisis, they took care of what mattered. "I'm planning to prove that some things are worth more than profit margins." But as she began working on her alternative proposal, a new notification popped up on her screen. The board had called an emergency meeting for the following morning. The subject line read, "Project Acceleration, Immediate Action Required." Time was running out, and Sarah wasn't the only one with plans for the industrial district's future. The old photograph was creased and faded, but the image remained clear. A young man in mechanic's overalls, standing proudly beside a half-restored Mustang, his smile bright beneath a thick mustache. Marcus held it carefully, showing it to Darius. As they took a break from their work, "That's my dad," he explained, "taken right after he got his first shop." said a man's worth isn't in what he owns, but in what he can build with his own hands. Darius studied the photo intently. He looks like you, Mr. Marcus. Yeah, Marcus smiled. He had better hair, though. The photo had surfaced that morning, tucked into one of the manuals donated by the community. Finding it felt like a sign, especially now with everything threatening to unravel. Across town, Sarah sat in the Chancellor Industries boardroom, her father's journal hidden in her lap beneath the conference table. The board members filed in, their expressions grim. "Ms. Chancellor," Harrison began, "we've called this meeting to discuss accelerating the development timeline. Our investors are concerned about the negative publicity surrounding the shelter situation." Sarah's fingers tightened around the journal. "Negative publicity we created by not considering the human cost of our actions." The human cost. Another board member scoffed, "is being dramatically overplayed by social media. We're offering relocation assistance." "To where?" Sarah interrupted, pulling up images on the main screen. "Have any of you visited the shelter? Seen what's actually happening there?" The photos showed the community she'd been secretly watching. Marcus teaching kids about engines, elderly residents helping with meals, volunteers coordinating medical care. And in many of them, the Mustang sat in the background, a constant reminder of resurrection and possibility. Back at the worksite, Marcus and Darius had returned to the car's interior, carefully removing decades of wear from the leather seats. The community meeting the night before had ended with more questions than answers, but also with a sense of shared purpose. "Mr. Marcus," Darius asked, working on a particularly stubborn stain, "what happens if they make us leave before we finish?" Marcus paused, looking at the progress they'd made. The engine now purred like new, the body was nearly restored, and the interior was their final major task. "We finish," he said firmly. "No matter what. Some things you don't leave undone." In the boardroom, Sarah was fighting her own battle. "Our company wasn't built on destruction," she argued, opening her father's journal. "Look at this, Dad's notes from when he started Chancellor Industries. He bought old factories not to tear them down, but to repurpose them. To preserve jobs, to build community. Times change, Miss Chancellor," Harrison said. "Your father's methods, while admirable, aren't sustainable in today's market." "Aren't they?" Sarah clicked to a news slide. "Because what I'm seeing in that industrial district is exactly what he believed in. People helping people, skills being passed down, community being built around restoration and renewal." She played a clip from her surveillance feed. Marcus explaining mechanical principles to a group of shelter residents, many of whom had lost manufacturing jobs. The board members shifted uncomfortably. "I have an alternative proposal," Sarah continued, "one that preserves the community while still delivering value to our shareholders." At the Mustang, Marcus was showing Darius a hidden detail in the door panel. A small inscription from the original assembly line worker. "See that? Someone took pride in their work, signed it so people would know, even 50 years later." "Can we sign our work too?" Darius asked. Marcus considered this. "Maybe something better. Maybe we make sure this car keeps telling stories long after we're done with it." In her father's journal, Sarah found herself reading the same passage, over and over. "A business that only measures success in dollars will eventually go bankrupt in all the ways that truly matter." She looked up at the board members, seeing them with new clarity. They weren't bad people, just disconnected, much like she had been before the Mustang project opened her eyes. "We have an opportunity," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Not just to develop property, but to develop potential, to prove that progress doesn't have to mean erasure." As she outlined her plan, Sarah realized that her father's old car had led her to understand his greatest lesson. True value isn't in what you take away, but in what you help build. The sun was setting by the time Marcus and Darius finished their work for the day. As they covered the car, Marcus noticed something. Darius had left his own small mark, not a signature, but a tiny drawing of a wrench and the words, "Second." Chances matter. Good work, kid, Marcus said softly. Good work. And in her office, watching on the monitors, Sarah Chancellor made her decision. The original paint chip was smaller than a postage stamp, preserved between two pieces of clear tape. Marcus held it up to the morning light, the Highland green metallic still vibrant after all these years. It had come from inside the door jamb, protected from sun and weather, a perfect reference for what the Mustang should become. Perfect match, said Tony from the body shop down the street, comparing the chip to his paint swatches. But Marcus, this much custom mixed paint, it ain't cheap. The small crowd gathered around the car shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew the shelter's deadline was approaching, and resources were already stretched thin. We can help, called out a voice. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant stepped forward. Our customers have been asking about the car. We put out a donation jar. Others joined in. The hardware store had done the same, the auto parts shop, even the local coffee cart. One by one they held out collections of cash and checks, small amounts that added up to something bigger. See? Darius beamed. Told you people care. Marcus stood silent, overwhelmed by the generosity. He'd spent so long believing he had to handle everything alone, and now, better not mess up the paint job then, he said gruffly, hiding his emotion. The preparation took days. Every surface had to be perfect. No shortcuts, no compromises. The community pitched in however they could. Veterans with bodywork experience helped sand and prime. Art students from the local college masked off the chrome trim. Even the kids helped, cleaning up and running errands. In her office, Sarah watched the transformation with growing anticipation. The cameras caught every detail. The meticulous preparation. The way Marcus checked each panel 3 times before declaring it ready. The careful instruction he gave to everyone who helped. The board approved your proposal, David announced, entering with a stack of documents. Though some still think you're crazy. Crazy would be destroying something beautiful just because it's not profitable. Sarah signed the papers without hesitation. Is everything ready? Yes. But Sarah, David hesitated. Are you sure about the timing? She watched the monitor as Marcus demonstrated proper sanding technique to a group of shelter residents. Some moments you can't plan. You just have to let them unfold. The day of painting arrived with perfect weather. No wind, low humidity, ideal conditions. Tony had opened his shop early, clearing space for the Mustang. The street had become an impromptu parade route as the car was carefully pushed into position. Remember, Marcus told the gathered volunteers, we're not just painting a car, we're bringing back its dignity. Every coat matters. The first layer went on like silk, the green so deep it seemed to swallow light. Marcus moved with practiced precision, each stroke even and sure. He'd insisted on doing the final coat himself, some things you don't delegate. Darius watched from a safe distance, face pressed against the observation window. Other kids joined him, their breath fogging the glass as they witnessed the transformation. It's like magic, one whispered. No, Darius corrected. It's like love. You got to be patient and do it right. The color brought the Mustang's lines back to life, revealing the poetry in its design. Every curve, every angle seemed to awaken under the paint. This wasn't just restoration, it was resurrection. As the final coat dried, the crowd grew. Word had spread through the neighborhood. People brought food, drinks, cameras. The local paper sent a photographer. Someone started playing music from their car stereo. Classic hits from '67. Almost. Ready to come home, Marcus murmured to the car, checking the paint's progress. He didn't know he was speaking aloud, that Sarah could hear him through the monitors. In her office, she closed her eyes, remembering her father saying those exact words decades ago. When she opened them, her decision was reinforced. Start the process, she told David. All of it. It'll cause quite a stir. Good. She watched as Marcus began teaching Darius how to check for paint flaws, how to feel the surface with sensitive fingers. Some stirs are long overdue. The sun was setting by the time they finished, casting long shadows through Tony's shop windows. The Mustang gleamed like a jewel, its Highland green paint deep and perfect. Tomorrow they would begin reassembly. But for now, Marcus and his community stood back, admiring their work, knowing that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones you bring back to life together. The Mustang's original keys felt heavy in Sarah's hand as she sat in her parked Tesla, watching Marcus and Darius work on the final chrome trim installation. The morning sun caught the fresh paint, making the Highland green metallic dance with an inner fire. Her father's car had never looked better, not even when new. "You don't have to do this now," David said from the passenger seat. "We could wait until after." "No." Sarah tucked her father's journal under her arm. "Some things you can't delegate." She dressed deliberately casual today. Jeans, a simple blouse, minimal jewelry. But there was no hiding the quality of her clothes, the subtle marks of privilege. That would be obvious to someone who'd been living on society's edges. Marcus noticed her approach first. Something in his posture shifted, a wariness born of experience. Rich people rarely ventured into this neighborhood with good intentions. "Can I help you?" he asked, straightening up and wiping his hands on a shop rag. Sarah felt her rehearsed speech evaporate. Up close, without the distance of surveillance cameras, Marcus's presence was more commanding, more real. His eyes held a quiet dignity that no monitor could capture. "The car," she managed. "I'm here about the car." Darius moved closer to Marcus, protective. Over the weeks, a small crowd had gathered to watch him work, but something about this felt different. "Are you from the city?" Marcus asked. "Because we've got permission to—" "No." Sarah held out the keys, her hand trembling slightly. "I'm the owner." The words fell like stones into still water. Marcus looked at the keys, then at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You left it here," he said softly. "On purpose." Sarah nodded. Around them, a small crowd was gathering. Jenny from the shelter, Tony from the body shop, the regular witnesses to Marcus's daily work, drawn by the tension in the air. "My father bought this car in 1967, Sarah explained. "Restored it himself. When he died, he left it to me with a note. Find someone who understands value, not just worth." Marcus's expression was unreadable. "And did you find what you were looking for?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Sarah looked at the Mustang, at the perfect paint, the detailed chrome, the careful restoration that had brought together an entire community. "I found more than I was looking for," she admitted. "I found—" "Cameras," Darius interrupted, pointing to the side mirror where one of Sarah's surveillance devices was barely visible. "Mr. Marcus, there's cameras." The mood shifted instantly. Marcus stepped back, his face hardening as he spotted more cameras cleverly hidden around the car. "How long?" he demanded. "Since the beginning," Sarah admitted. "I needed to know if I'd steal it, strip it, prove what a homeless man would do with something valuable." The words weren't angry, just tired, disappointed. "No, I needed to see who would understand what my father taught me. That true value isn't in what something costs, but in what you're willing to invest in it," Marcus finished. "Your father's words. I heard them in your board meeting yesterday." Sarah froze. "You knew." "Chancellor Industries, the development project, wasn't hard to figure out once I started paying attention." He gestured to the shelter. "Harder to understand how someone who talks about value could plan to destroy all. This." The crowd was larger now, realization spreading through whispers. "Sarah Chancellor, the CEO, the developer." "That's why I'm here," Sarah said quickly. "Not just for the car. I have a proposal." "A proposal?" Marcus laughed. But there was no humor in it. "Let me guess, a job? A nice write-up in the company newsletter about charitable giving. A feel-good story to smooth over the displacement of 43 people. Each question hit Sarah like a physical blow. Put in those terms, her carefully crafted plans felt hollow, manipulative. "You don't understand," she tried again. "No, you don't understand." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "This car? It's not just metal and paint. It's become something more. Every person who helped, every kid who learned, every donation and hour of work. That's the real restoration that happened here. He turned to the Mustang, running his hand along its perfect finish one last time. "Keep your proposals," he said. "And your car, some things are worth more than ownership." As he walked away, Darius trailing behind him, Sarah stood alone in the morning sun, the keys cutting into her palm, her father's journal heavy in her arms. She watched the community disperse, their backs turned to her, and realized that in trying to test someone else's worth, she'd revealed something painful about her own. David appeared at her side. "What now?" Sarah looked at the Mustang, at the shelter, at the retreating figure of the man who had unwittingly taught her father's most important lesson. "Now," she said, "we fix what's really broken." The security footage played silently on Sarah's laptop, an endless loop of the morning's confrontation. Each viewing revealed new details. The way Marcus's shoulders had tensed when he spotted the camera, how Darius had moved protectively closer, the ripple of betrayal that had passed through the watching crowd. "You need to stop torturing yourself," David said, setting a fresh coffee on her desk. "The board is waiting for your final decision on the development project." Sarah closed the laptop, but couldn't escape the images. I convinced myself this was some kind of noble experiment, testing character, finding authenticity, and instead, I violated someone's dignity, turned their struggle into my personal reality show." She pulled out her father's journal. "Dad would be ashamed." Across town, Marcus sat in the shelter's common room, surrounded by concerned faces. Jenny had called an emergency meeting, but no one quite knew what to do with the revelation that their community's fate lay in the hands of the woman who'd been secretly watching them. "All that time," Marcus said, more to himself than the group. Every lesson with Darius, every volunteer hour, every donation, she was watching, studying us like specimens. "Maybe she learned something," Jenny suggested gently, "the way she looked at the end. Doesn't matter what she learned." Marcus stood, pacing restlessly. "Trust is like an engine. Once it's broken, you can't just patch it up and expect it to run like new." The Mustang sat outside, its perfect paint catching the afternoon light. People walked past it now with different eyes, no longer seeing hope and community, but a symbol of deception. Back in her office, Sarah was reviewing the development. Plans with growing frustration. "There has to be a way," she muttered, spreading out blueprints and financial projections. "The numbers don't lie," David reminded her. "The project needs to show return on investment." "Numbers do lie, David. They lie by what they don't measure." She gestured to her monitors. "How do you quantify the value of Darius learning trade skills? Or veterans finding purpose in bodywork? Or a community coming together around a shared goal?" She pulled up the footage from the past weeks. Marcus teaching kids about engines, the elderly mechanic sharing stories, the local businesses pooling resources. Each clip highlighted something precious that spreadsheets couldn't capture. At the shelter, Darius had finally broken his silence. "Mr. Marcus, are we still going to finish the car?" The question hung heavy in the air. Marcus looked out at the Mustang, so close to completion, yet now feeling distant as the moon. "Don't know, kid. Some things get complicated when truth comes out. But you always say we don't leave things half done." Darius's voice carried the simple wisdom of youth. "You say that's not who we are." In the Chancellor Industries boardroom, Sarah stood before the executive committee, her father's journal open beside her presentation materials. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm withdrawing the original development proposal." The room erupted in protests, but Sarah held up her hand. "Instead, I'm presenting an alternative, one that honors both progress and preservation." She clicked to her first slide. "Welcome to the Chancellor Community Innovation Center." Back at the shelter, Marcus found himself drawn to the Mustang as darkness fell. His tools still lay scattered nearby, waiting to complete the final details. He picked up a wrench, its weight familiar in his hand. "Your daughter's got a lot to learn about trust," he said to the car, thinking of its original owner. "But maybe..." She was right about one thing. Value isn't just about worth. A noise made him turn. Darius stood nearby, toolbox in hand. "Community meeting's over," the boy said. "They voted. Said we should finish what we started, no matter what. Did they now? Said it's not about her anymore. It's about us. What we built here." In her office, Sarah was still working as night. Fell, revising plans, making calls, trying to undo damage while preserving possibility. The security feeds remained dark. She'd had the cameras removed that afternoon. "First step in rebuilding trust," she told David, "is to stop breaking it." She looked out her window at the city lights, thinking of Marcus's words about engines and trust. Some things couldn't be fixed quickly or easily. Some restorations required more than just resources and good intentions. The next morning, both Sarah and Marcus would face choices about how to move forward. But for now, in the quiet of evening, the Mustang sat between their worlds, a bridge between privilege and poverty, between deception and truth, between what was broken and what might yet be rebuilt. An unfinished weld on the Mustang's rear quarter panel caught the morning light, a small detail that most would miss, but Marcus couldn't ignore. Like everything else about the car now, it felt like a metaphor, a connection left incomplete, a repair unfinished. "The media's here again," Jenny announced, approaching with her usual coffee offering. "They're calling it the Billionaire's social experiment, running stories about privacy violations, class exploitation." Marcus took the coffee without looking up from the weld. "Not interested. They're saying the shelter closure is suspended pending review." That made him pause. "Chancellor?" Her office issued a statement this morning. Something about reassessing community impact and exploring alternative development strategies. Jenny sat on a nearby crate. "People are calling it damage control." "People aren't wrong." Marcus returned to his work, the welding torch casting blue shadows. "Hard to look charitable while evicting homeless people you've been secretly filming." Across town, Sarah stood in her father's old workshop, untouched since his death. Dust covered the tools, but everything remained exactly as he'd left it. She ran her fingers along a workbench, remembering weekends spent here, learning lessons she'd somehow forgotten. "The board wants to know if you're still planning to attend tonight's charity gala," David said from the doorway. "Given the current situation." "The situation I created, you mean?" Sarah picked up an old wrench. "Did you know my father used to host free auto repair clinics here? Called them community fix-it days. Any car, any problem." "Sarah, I thought I was honoring his legacy with that ridiculous surveillance scheme. Instead, I just proved how far I've strayed from everything he taught me." At the shelter, Darius sat watching Marcus work. The boy hadn't missed a day, despite everything. If anything, the revelation seemed to have strengthened his dedication. "My mum says we should be angry," he said suddenly. "About the cameras and stuff." Marcus carefully set down his tools. "Are you? Sort of, but also—" Darius gestured at the Mustang. "Look what we built. Look what we learned. That's real, isn't it? Even if the reason behind it wasn't." The question hit Marcus hard. He thought about all the people who'd contributed to the restoration, the veterans who'd helped with bodywork, the local businesses that had donated supplies, the kids who'd discovered a passion for mechanics. None of that had been fake. In her father's workshop, Sarah was reviewing old photographs. One caught her eye. Her father standing with a group of people around a partially restored car, everyone smiling despite being covered in grease and rust. "He understood something I forgot," she told David. "That true change doesn't happen from a distance. You have to get your hands dirty." She placed the photo carefully in her father's journal. "Cancel my appearance at the gala. Instead, get me. Everything you can find about successful community development projects. Ones that preserved existing neighborhoods instead of replacing them." The afternoon brought more reporters to the shelter, but the community had closed ranks. They protected Marcus and the Mustang, turning cameras away, refusing interviews. This story was theirs, not some media spectacle. "Got a call from Mike's Auto Parts," Jenny told Marcus. He's still holding those original trim pieces for us, says they're paid for, might as well use them. Marcus nodded, but didn't move to retrieve them. The final details of the restoration hung in limbo, like words left unsaid. Sarah spent her afternoon in meetings with community development experts, urban planners, and social workers. Her office walls were covered in new proposals, maps, and statistics. "Your father would be proud," David said, watching her work. "Not yet," Sarah replied, "but maybe soon." As evening approached, Marcus found himself alone with the Mustang. The unfinished details seemed to call to him, the trim waiting to be installed, the final adjustments to be made, the small imperfections that only he could see. "What would you do?" he asked the car. "If you were more than just metal and memories?" The answer came in the form of Darius's voice from behind him. "You always say every repair teaches us something. So what's this one teaching?" Marcus turned to find not just Darius, but a small group of shelter residents and local supporters. They stood waiting, tools in hand, ready to continue despite everything. "Maybe," Marcus said slowly, "it's teaching us that sometimes the most important repairs aren't the ones you can see." In her empty office, Sarah reached a similar conclusion as she finalized her new proposal. Some restorations required more than just resources and good intentions. They required presence, participation, and most importantly, truth. The question was whether it was too late for such repairs to matter. The letter arrived at the shelter on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered in a plain envelope. No corporate letterhead, no official stamps, just Marcus's name written in careful cursive. Jenny brought it to him as he worked on the Mustang's final interior details. "It's from her," Jenny said simply. Marcus wiped his hands before taking the envelope. The paper was expensive, but the letter inside was remarkably straightforward. "Dear Marcus, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation, and then I owe you silence, the space to decide what happens next. My father taught me about cars before he taught me about business. He said every engine tells a story, if you know how to listen. That's what I thought I was doing with the cameras, listening to a story. Instead, I was writing my own, using real people as characters without their consent. But you taught me something my father tried to show me years ago, that true value isn't found through observation, but through participation. Through getting your hands dirty, through failing and trying again, through building community instead of just writing checks." I've enclosed my father's journal. The last entry is about the Mustang, about finding someone who understands value over worth. He was right. I just looked in the wrong way. The car is yours if you want it. No strings, no cameras, no corporate PR. Just recognition that sometimes the person who gives something value should be the one to own it. As for the shelter and the development project, I've attached the new proposal. Not for your approval. You don't owe me that. But because you deserve to see what your work has inspired. Whatever you decide about the car, know that your restoration project restored something in me too, Sarah. Marcus read the letter twice. Before opening the worn journal, the pages were filled with technical notes, philosophical musings, and detailed observations about cars and character. The final entry, dated just weeks before the owner's death, caught his attention. The Mustang's not just a car. It's a lesson about value and worth, about seeing potential in what others discard. Sarah needs to learn this, not in the boardroom, but in the garage. Find someone who can teach her what I tried to. "Well?" Jenny asked, watching his expression. Marcus handed her the letter and journal. "Read it yourself. I need to think." He turned back to the car, running his hand along. "It's perfect paint." The restoration was nearly complete, just small details remaining, finishing touches that would make it truly whole. Across town, Sarah was in her father's workshop again, but this time with purpose. She'd spent the morning cleaning, organizing, preparing. David found her there, covered in dust, but looking more alive than she had in weeks. "The community center plans are ready," he said. Contractors are standing by. Sarah nodded, continuing her work. Has Marcus? No response yet. Good. He needs time. She stepped back, surveying the workshop. Meanwhile, we prepare. Dad's old fix-it days are coming back, whether Marcus decides to be part of them or not. At the shelter, word of the letter spread quickly. Opinions varied. Some saw it as genuine redemption, others as corporate manipulation. Marcus kept working, letting the familiar rhythms of restoration guide his thoughts. Darius found him late in the afternoon, carefully polishing chrome trim. My mom read the letter, the boy said. Says sometimes proud people have to learn humility the hard way. Marcus smiled. Your mom's pretty wise. She also says sometimes teaching is more important than being right. That stopped Marcus's polishing. He looked at Darius, really looked at him, and saw how much the boy had grown through this project, not just in skills, but in understanding. When did you get so smart, kid? Learned from the best. Darius picked up a polishing cloth. So, are we going to finish the car? Marcus looked at the Mustang, thinking about Sarah's father's last wish, about teaching and learning, about value and worth. He thought about the community that had formed around this project and how true restoration was, never just about the physical object. Yeah, he said finally, we're going to finish it. But first, he pulled out a piece of paper and began to write, Dear Sarah, your father was right about engines telling stories. This one's got quite a tale to tell. The letter would be short, but it would change everything. Because sometimes understanding starts with a single word, written with an open heart. The shelter's deed lay on the conference room table, its legal language stark against the warm wood. Sarah sat at one end, Marcus at the other, with Jenny and David filling the spaces between. Outside, through the Chancellor Industries windows, the Mustang gleamed in the parking lot, now fully restored. It's not charity, Sarah said, addressing the concern she could see in Marcus's expression. It's investment in community. The shelter becomes a non-profit entity, independent of Chancellor Industries. We provide initial funding and technical support, but the governance is entirely local. Jenny picked up the document, scanning its contents. And the development project becomes the Chancellor Community Innovation Center, with the shelter as its cornerstone. Sarah spread out the blueprints. Auto repair training, small business incubation, youth mentorship programs, everything that's already happening naturally, just with proper support and resources. Marcus studied the plans. The architectural renderings showed the familiar streets transformed, but not erased. The old buildings would be renovated, not replaced. The community's soul preserved, not just its facade. And what do you want in return? He asked quietly. Sarah met his gaze. Your expertise, not as an employee, but as a partner. The training program needs someone who understands both mechanics and mentorship. Someone who sees value where others see problems. A ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's face. Someone who fixes things. Someone who teaches others how to fix things, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. The room fell silent as Marcus considered the proposal. Through the window, he could see Darius showing a group of kids around the Mustang, pointing out details of the restoration with proud expertise. Your father's journal, Marcus said finally. The last entry about the car. About finding someone to teach you what he couldn't. Sarah nodded. I thought I was honoring his wishes with the surveillance experiment. Instead, I was just proving how much I still had to learn. And now I understand what he meant about value versus worth. She gestured to the scene outside. What you built around that car, the teaching, the community, the hope, that's what he wanted me to see. That's what Chancellor Industries should be supporting. Marcus turned back to the deed. The shelter stays independent, no corporate control. Completely independent. We provide resources, you provide direction. Everything in writing, everything. Transparent. Jenny had finished reading the documents. It's solid, Marcus. Better than solid, it's revolutionary. a template for how development could actually serve communities instead of destroying them. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Below, Darius had opened the Mustang's hood, explaining the engine's restoration to his rapt audience. The scene reflected everything he'd dreamed of but never thought possible. A chance to pass on not just skills, but purpose. One condition, he said, turning back to Sarah. Name it. The Mustang becomes community property, part of the training program. Kids learn on it, work on it, keep it running. It stays with the shelter, not with me or Chancellor Industries. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Dad would have loved that. Your father understood something important, Marcus said, sitting back down. Something I had to learn the hard way, too. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't things at all. They're the connections we build, the knowledge we share, the hope we create. He picked up a pen and reached for the deed. So, partners? Sarah extended her hand. Partners. As they shook hands, David began distributing folders to everyone. These contain the full project timeline, budget allocations, and organizational structure. The press release goes out tomorrow, but we wanted the community to hear it from you. First, Jenny was already making notes. We'll need to call a full shelter meeting and reach out to local businesses. They've been part of this from the beginning. They should be part of its future. Outside, the crowd around the Mustang had grown. The afternoon sun caught its paint, making it glow like a beacon of possibility. Marcus watched as Darius handled the questions with growing confidence, teaching others what he'd learned. One more thing, Sarah said, pulling out a small box. Found these in Dad's workshop, original keys to the Mustang, from when he first bought it. She slid them across the table. They belong with the car now, with the community. Marcus picked up the keys, feeling their weight, not just metal but legacy. Your father would be proud, he said, not of the car but of what you're building now. Sarah looked out at the growing crowd, at the mix of shelter residents and local citizens, at the barriers breaking down and the connections being forged. We're building, she corrected, all of us together. The future stretched out before them, not as a corporate blueprint, but as a community's dream taking shape. And at its heart, a restored Mustang stood as proof that sometimes the most valuable transformations aren't the ones you can see, but the ones you can feel in the connections forged, the lessons learned, and the hope restored. The business plan spread across the workshop table was spotted with oil stains and coffee rings, signs of real work happening around real planning. Marcus and Sarah sat reviewing the latest draft of the automotive training program, while outside, the sounds of construction mixed with the familiar noise of engines being repaired. 3 months, Sarah mused, looking through the open garage door at the partially renovated buildings. Hard to believe how much has changed. The Chancellor Community Innovation Center was taking shape, but not in the sterile, corporate way originally planned. The old buildings were being restored rather than replaced, their weathered brick cleaned but not concealed. The shelter's original structure now housed an expanded residential program, while adjacent buildings had been converted into training spaces and small business incubators. Darius already has 5 students in his junior mechanics program, Marcus said, pride evident in his voice. Kid's a natural teacher. Sarah smiled, remembering how the board had initially balked at the idea of a 15-year-old running youth workshops. But Darius had proved them wrong, turning his weekend classes into one of the center's most popular programs. Speaking of teaching, she said, pulling out a folder, the community college wants to formalize the certification program, real credentials for the skills people are learning here. Marcus nodded, thinking of the shelter residents who'd found purpose in the training programs. Veterans applying their discipline to precision mechanics. Former factory workers adapting their manufacturing experience to restoration work. Single parents learning bookkeeping and business management alongside automotive skills. Your father would have loved this, he said, gesturing to the bustling workshop. It's what he was trying to build, isn't it? This is better. Sarah picked up an intake form from a growing stack. He taught me about cars and value, but you taught me about community and transformation. The form was for a new resident, a mechanic who'd lost his shop in the economic downturn. Instead of just offering shelter, the program would help him rebuild his business, teaching others while restoring his own life. Outside, the Mustang sat in its new place of honor, surrounded by training stations where beginners learned the basics of automotive care. Its restoration was now a constant, teaching tool, with every component telling a story of renewal. "Mr. Marcus!" Darius burst in, excitement overcoming his usual professional demeanor. "Tony from the body shop just donated his old paint booth. Says if we help him upgrade his shop's equipment, we can use it for the training program." The news represented exactly what the center was meant to create, partnerships that benefited everyone. Local businesses were discovering that investing in the community meant investing in their own future. "Good work, kid," Marcus said. "Want to help draft the agreement?" Sarah watched them bend over the paperwork, Darius learning the business side of his growing skills. The boy who'd started as a curious onlooker was becoming a bridge between worlds, equally comfortable, teaching rich kids from the suburbs and peers from the shelter. "The board meeting's at 2, David reminded Sarah, appearing in the doorway. "They're expecting the first quarter results from the Innovation Center. They're going to be surprised," Sarah said, gathering her materials. The center's impact couldn't be measured just in dollars and cents, but she'd found ways to quantify the value of lives transformed, skills gained, and community strengthened. As she packed up, a commotion outside drew their attention. A flatbed truck was arriving, carrying a battered classic car. The crowd gathering around it included shelter residents, local mechanics, and business owners, all barriers broken by shared purpose. "Another restoration project?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled. "Better, first commission for our new training program. Owner wants us to restore it, but with students doing the work under supervision. Says he'd rather pay for education than just labor." The idea was spreading. Other car owners were beginning to understand that choosing the Center for Restoration work meant investing in community transformation. Each project became a hands-on classroom, creating opportunities for learning, mentorship, and growth. "Chancellor Industries' brightest investment," David remarked, watching the activity, though not in ways the board originally imagined. Sarah thought about the quarterly reports waiting on her desk, filled with numbers that told only part of the story. The real returns were in the confident stance of a teenager teaching engine repair, in the proud smile of a single mother starting her own detailing business, in the renewed spirit of a community that had found its strength. "We're not just fixing cars," she said, echoing words she'd heard Marcus say countless times. "We're fixing the connections between people." As she left for her board meeting, Sarah paused to watch Darius organizing his afternoon class around the newly arrived car. He had the same look of purpose she'd seen in him during the Mustang's restoration, the look of someone who understood that teaching others to rebuild was the greatest restoration of all. The Innovation Center was more than a project now. It was proof that when you invest in people's potential, the returns go far beyond the bottom line. 1 year later, the Mustang gleamed in the morning sun, its Highland green paint as perfect as the day it was finished. But now it sat at the heart of a transformed community, surrounded by the busy life of the Chancellor Community Innovation Center. Marcus stood beside it, watching as Darius prepared for the day's first class. The boy, nearly a young man now, moved with quiet confidence as he arranged tools and training materials. "Ready for the big day?" Marcus asked. "Almost." Darius adjusted his instructor's badge, still new enough to make him stand a little straighter. "Still can't believe we're really doing this." The center was launching its first official certification program, with Darius as the youngest qualified instructor. 20 students would be starting their journey today, following the path that had begun with one abandoned car and an unlikely restoration. Sarah arrived early, carrying her father's journal. She'd made it a tradition to read from it at important center events, keeping his vision alive in the work they did. "The board sends their congratulations," she told Marcus. "The center's success has exceeded every projection. Because you learned to measure the right things," Marcus replied. Around them, the center hummed with activity. Former shelter residents now ran small businesses from renovated spaces. Local mechanics partnered with training programs. The community had not just survived, but flourished, proving that preservation and progress could work hand in hand. "Remember, when you first found the car?" Darius asked, running his hand along the Mustang's fender. "Did you ever think it would lead to all this?" Marcus exchanged a look with Sarah. "Sometimes the best restorations aren't the ones you plan." The first students began arriving, a diverse group that reflected the center's mission. A veteran looking for a new career, a single mother determined to start her own business, teenagers from both wealthy suburbs and city neighborhoods, all drawn by the chance to learn real skills. Sarah opened her father's journal to a marked page. "Dad wrote something here that seems right for today. The true test of restoration isn't in making something look new, but in giving it the chance to be useful again." She looked around at the center, at the restored buildings now full of purpose, at the people whose lives had found new direction, at the community that had discovered its own strength. "He was right," Marcus said, "just not in the way any of us expected." The morning ceremony was simple but meaningful. Each student received a toolbox, a tradition Marcus had started, remembering the importance of his own father's tools. Sarah spoke about value and worth, lessons learned from both her father and the community. Darius demonstrated the Mustang's engine, showing how one restoration had sparked countless others. "Every car tells a story," he told his students, echoing words he'd learned from Marcus. "Our job isn't just to fix them, but to understand what they can teach us." After the ceremony, Sarah found Marcus in the workshop, looking at old photographs from the Mustang's restoration. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For showing me what Dad was trying to teach me, about value, about community, about real investment in people." Marcus smiled. "Thank you for learning, for being willing to change course when you saw a better way." Through the window, they could see Darius with his first class, teaching with the same patience Marcus had shown him. The Mustang served as their textbook, each part telling a story of restoration and renewal. "You know," Sarah said, "when I first set up those cameras, I thought I was looking for someone worthy of Dad's car. Instead, I found someone worthy of carrying on his real legacy." "We all did," Marcus replied, watching his former student become a teacher. "That's the thing about restoration. Sometimes you think you're fixing one thing, but you end up rebuilding something much bigger." The day continued, full of the sounds of learning and work. Veterans teaching precision to teenagers, business owners sharing wisdom with startups, community members dropping by with donations and encouragement. The barriers between helper and helped, teacher and student, privilege and need, had blurred into something stronger, a shared investment in each other's success. As evening approached, Marcus and Darius covered the Mustang, their nightly ritual now part of the center's rhythm. The car was more than transportation now. It was a symbol of what people could achieve together, of how one restoration could spark countless others. "Ready for tomorrow?" Marcus asked his former apprentice. Darius nodded, confident in his new role. "Always ready to help fix things, Mr. Marcus, just like you taught me." "No," Marcus corrected gently, looking out at their transformed community. "Like we taught each other." And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of lives restored and hope renewed, they all understood that some restorations never really end. They just keep building, growing and transforming, one lesson at a time.